You're listening to the Radcast, a top 25 worldwide business podcast. If it's radical, we cover it. Here's your host, Ryan Alford.
Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to the latest edition of the Radcast. I'm Ryan Alford, your host. We like to say, if it's radical, we cover it. And you know what? It takes someone quite radical to hit my radar these days. Going through my TikToks and through my Instagram and everything else, and a guy named Sun Yi keeps showing up, like hitting my feed. They must know I like it because he's here, and he's the founder of Night Owl's digital agency and a badass marketer, if I do say so myself. What's up, Sun?
What's up, Ryan? Thank you so much for having me on.
Hey, my pleasure, brother. I like your work. I've checked out your stuff. I was like, look, it takes a lot to break through, as you know, and you preach about breaking through, and you're actually breaking through yourself. So it's like when I see someone practicing what they preach, I like to come down from the balcony with an amen, a hallelujah, brother. Like in my old Southern Baptist, Ken used to say, you're doing it, man. And I really appreciate it. I know we'll get into some of those things, but I appreciate you coming on and excited to kind of break it down. How's life treat you in Austin?
Pretty good. I recently moved here. It's getting acclimated, but pretty good.
Yeah, keeping it weird. Coming from Manhattan, right?
Yeah.
You get heated up here. You headed towards the summertime. We're warming up, right? Is it getting hot in Texas? Has that been a change for you?
I actually like the hot. I was kind of sick of the cold, the snowstorms. Yeah. So I love it here.
It's cool. I know you're back and forth with your agency in New York. We'll get to that with Night Owl and all that's going on. But Sun, let's set the table for everybody. Let's tell the Sun Yi story a little bit, and then building into some of your practices, principles, best tips, and marketing, and this crazy world of AI we're living in. But let's start down that path for me.
Yeah, so I started out, I'm a hands-on person, so I'm a developer and a designer. So I used to make websites. So I started out freelancing, started my agency in 2010, mainly doing websites. We played around with a bunch of different niche, but eventually we, about 6 years ago, landed on personal branding. And that started with Gabby Bernstein walking into our... Before that, we worked with clients like Spotify, American Red Cross, Columbia University, some bigger corporate brands. But when I got kind of tired of that because I was working with marketing managers and marketing directors who are basically like 9-to-5ers. So they don't want us to do anything innovative. Like their job is not to get fired. So they wanted to keep everything safe, nothing innovative, just meet deadlines. But when I worked with Gabby, it was like a different, because it was her own brand. So I found I reignited this passion, and I didn't know at that time this whole personal brand, like personal development area. Like the only thing I knew about Tony Robbins was that he was in shallow hell. So I went down that rabbit hole, and I kind of fell in love with that whole like space of like personal development, things like that. And she started introducing us to all these other personal brands. I don't know if you know Jay Shetty.
Oh, yeah.
Mel Robbins. And then recently we started working with Mark Randolph, the co-founder of Netflix.
Yep, I know Mark. And Mark's been on the show.
Oh, yeah, I actually saw that. Yeah. So I felt like, what's going on? Because around that time, that was like 3 years ago.
Yeah.
I was like, why is Kevin O'Leary starting a YouTube channel? Like, why is Will Smith starting a YouTube channel? I'm like, what's going on? And I kind of realized that like personal brand is kind of the future, because I realized that influence is like the future. It's like the new oil, right? So I decided to build my own personal. I've always been behind the camera, like behind the curtain type of person, but I'm like, I gotta go out there. So I spent like $15,000 buying all this video equipment, hiring a video person. I'm going to be like the next Gary Vee, and then have him follow me around. But that didn't really work. That wasn't my style.
Yeah.
And then COVID happened, and I just started taking my Zoom recordings, like clips of it, and started posting it online. And then I found this whole community of Instagrammers who make carousels, and like copywriting and design is my passion. So I started making those, and it just started blowing it up. And then now here I am.
On the Radcast. No, I know, but it's fascinating to me, the world of personal branding. You know, it's kind of got that cringe-worthy name, right? I've tried for 3 years to come up with a different name, but it's kind of like trying to rename Google. You know, like you can't do it. Like there's just too much equity in it, and people know it and understand it. A lot of people kind of roll their eyes at it, but at the end of the day, it's just reputation, right? It's like reputation amplification. And so, and I think that's the biggest thing. Like you talked about you being a developer and kind of getting behind the camera, you know, from behind the camera to in front of the camera, which may not have worked for you, but you recognize the power of being known. And that's what I trademarked the line, it pays to be known. Like it literally, I mean, that's really what it's about, right?
I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you if I didn't do my Instagram, right? So, and I've had so many opportunities like that where, you know, people will either reach out to me out. There are people that I would reach out to that probably wouldn't have given me a time of day, but because I put out content, you know, they see it and then they'll reply.
Yeah. You talked about it, and I think a lot of people, that's the biggest thing, like getting in front of the camera. They're like, okay, I'm not good in front of the camera. I don't like it. Like, what was the pivot point for you? Was it like because you didn't feel like you were getting the traction, or because you just didn't like it? Or both?
I guess I've never even thought of myself as kind of a personality, right? Or like I'm kind of shy, actually.
Yep.
And when I started, but I knew, like you said, I knew I had to get out of there, because what I started noticing is, like, I saw that whole Kylie Jenner thing. Like, she became the youngest billionaire, like all of her personal brand. So I started going out there, but when I did that whole YouTube thing and I watched it back, I felt so cringe. I was like, I sound like that, and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But then I kind of like watching my videos over and over. I think I got used to it. And what I usually say is, people talk about self-love all the time. Like, this process really, truly made me love myself. I don't think I like really love myself before, but just keep hearing myself over and over. Like, after a couple of years, I happen to watch videos. I'm like, oh, I sound pretty good. And that's when I realized, like, I really love myself.
No, I'm glad you found it, because I love your content and I want you to keep making it. So, I'm glad you found that. And that's a really introspective take, and something that people that might roll their eyes or might not think about it. And I want to get, your opinion and how much you get into the business of trying to convince people to do personal branding. We'll come back to that. But, but that getting to see yourself and getting to recognize your skills and your talents and what you're good at, whether it's carousels or videos or whatever, that's a really powerful discovery in what can come out of this. And that's what I talk to people about all the time when I counsel people on the personal branding side, is like, you're leaving a legacy and you're discovering a lot about yourself that you may not know. I think that's a really powerful notion.
Yeah. So when I hear the word self-awareness, I think a lot of people don't realize that self-awareness is not really knowing myself. I actually think that we're the worst person to try to define who we are, because there's an idea of, for example, I'm very emotional and impulsive, but I hate that about myself. So if you were to tell me to define myself, I'm gonna define the perfect ideal version of me, not the real me. But what I noticed is that when I started uploading my Zoom recordings, that was the real me. Like before, when I was like on YouTube, it's like, hey everybody, like, all of that. That wasn't really me. So maybe that's why I felt like a little bit awkward. But when I started putting up Zoom calls, people started kind of resonating with me, and I thought everybody's gonna hate me. Like, why is this guy always yelling? Why is he so so emotional and all of that? But what I realized is that people around me, that's what they love about me. And what I usually tell people is, don't try to define your brand. Ask the people around you, your family, friends, like, what do they come to you for, right? Because I think that's like a little hint that they come to you for example, if somebody breaks up with their, boyfriend or girlfriend, and they want to hear the truth, they want to hear, like, not the bubbly, the rainbow, sunshine, but they want to hear what they did wrong. They'll come to me because I'm going to tell them straight up. It's like, you messed up there, right? But then if they want somebody to just comfort them and make them feel good, they'll go to my wife because that's what she'll do, right? And that's how we're different.
Yeah.
So I think we really need to step into that, who you really are, like that. And then that's the benefit. That's what you're serving.
Yes. And that's the key and that's back to authenticity, right? That's you being your authentic self and learning that about yourself and then leaning into it more, like, all right, how can I, sometimes people, use the term like unpeeling the onion, right? But sometimes if it's not the right onion, like you're going further down the wrong hole. But but when you find that path, you get real dangerous, like in a good way, because you're unpeeling that authentic self and getting more comfortable with being you. And I think that's what personal branding and authority building is all about.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. It's not like I'm just talking about what I want to talk about.
Yeah.
Because, in marketing, we always know that it's all about the customers, right? So to give you an example, before you talked about the term personal brand, like when I started in my agency, I always thought that what we do is brand strategy. We work with them to do brand storytelling, and that's a huge part of what we do. But when I go to a networking party or when I meet people and I'm like, we do brand strategy, we do brand storytelling, something like that, they're like, oh, yeah, that's cool. Like, what is that? Or something like that. But whenever I said I'm a web designer, they'll be like, oh, I need a website. Or, oh, I know somebody who needs a website. So that's when I realized that there's a difference between what we think people need and what they actually want, right? So I just, like you said, I go by whatever they say. If they call me a web designer, okay, that's what I am.
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah.
I've run into those issues where exact same thing. I'm trying to use like this high level marketing speak, it's like, whew, I don't know if it's going over their head or under mine. I don't know, but it's like, I'm talking to myself, and that's dangerous in its own right. But I want to come back to something, because do you get in the business of trying to convince people to talk, to get into the personal branding? Or do you just deal with, people that have gotten over that hump and they know they need something?
Well, I think the people that I'm teaching right now, they're not necessarily at the level of like Mark Randolph, right?
Sure.
Those are my clients in my agency.
Yeah.
But in my content, I'm talking to people like yoga teachers or, like a therapist or coach or somebody that provides some sort of a service, but their expertise. And they kind of are a personal brand because, they're kind of selling themselves, but they're not really putting out content and stuff like that. So I don't force anybody. I don't tell people to go build your personal brand, but I show them the benefit of that. Because once you build a personal brand, you can start a yoga studio. You can start a yoga apparel line. You can literally build as many businesses you want, and you have eyeballs on it immediately, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I believe.
Well, you build leverage. Tension is, and I mean, I think that's a Gary V old term of tension is leverage, but he's right, which is once you have the followers or the eyeballs or the attention, whatever, you can point it towards anything. No different than The Rock or, a celebrity is the best example. They gain all this fame, maybe from wrestling, maybe from movies, maybe from whatever. And then they are pointing it towards tequila or a gym or whatever they want because, they have fans, and it's
also the trust because like when people buy a Tesla, right? In the back of their mind, they're thinking like, okay, I trust Elon Musk. Or if I'm flying a Virgin America, right? Like, okay, I trust Richard Branson, right? But the thing about brands without that face, it's almost like, okay, what's going to happen if they mess up? Like I'm just who am I going to blame? The board? Right?
Yeah.
Like people want somebody to put blame on, right? So I think that's kind of what makes people feel safe, like buying a Tesla or buying, I forgot what tequila company that The Rock has.
Yeah, well, I think of Casamigos, which is not The Rock, but that's George Clooney, and whoever else. But it's the same thing. They know
Ryan Reynolds,
but they all pivot into things, And you're right, they've built, that authenticity and the trust that, hey, if George Clooney, The Rock, Ryan Reynolds, if they make this, I trust that it's going to be premium or quality on some level because of, that relationship they've built with their fans, right?
Yeah.
And it's the same thing.
They're putting their name on the line.
That's right. What's well, talk to me about the bigger stars, the Mark Randolphs, the people that come to your agency that are down this path already, but perhaps are coming to you and your agency for that next step, an elevated website, an elevated brand story. What's that process like, and what do you kind of help distill for them?
Yeah, it's a lot like therapy. Because
you bring the brown couch out, lay down.
Exactly. So we have a 3-hour kind of brainstorming session when we start, and usually our clients like, what? Like 3 hours, right? They're busy people, right?
Yeah.
But during that 3 hours, they'll kind of tell me their whole life story. And my job is to kind of figure out which point in their life was a turning point, right? Like, what's the thing that made them who they are now? So in order to do that, I have to ask a lot of questions, like do this whole therapy thing. For example, like Mark Randolph, through the whole, if you go to his about page, that's where we tell the story. Mm-hmm. But through this whole discovery, we figure out that he has a very curious, rebellious mind. So when he was young, he would pull the fire alarm and cause trouble.
He was that kid.
So exactly. So he would just try things, right? So when he started Netflix, the first thing they did is they just bought a CD, put it in an envelope, and mailed it to himself to see what would happen, right? And that's kind of like what he preaches. He says, don't make a perfect business plan. Don't go and raise money right away. Just whatever it is, try it first and see what happens. And the tagline he uses is, there's no such thing as a good idea. Because you know how everybody says there's no such thing as a bad idea?
Yeah.
He says there's no such thing as a good idea. Everything starts out bad. No matter what you come up with, it's going to start out bad. And you just got to try things out.
Iteration. Iteration creates value. It's like everything is better. Like a website, I'm going to speak web language right here. 1.0, 1.1, 1.2. You know,
exactly.
Version 4.0 is way better than 1.2.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so iteration breeds value, breeds change. And really it's about change. Like everybody gets in love with their own thing, you know. It's like, oh, I don't want to tell anyone this secret, you know. It's going to get out. They're going to copy it, and it's like, well, that's probably, to Mark's point, a bad idea that needs refinement, right? So you go through that with them, and then you help them distill all of that into language and ways to which to bring that to life.
Exactly. Yeah. So the typical brand story I see is like, oh, I went to this college, I worked at this, and I won these awards, you know. Or if it's a company, it'll be like, we were founded in, you know, this year, and then we, you know, that's not a story, right? That's a biography.
Yeah.
So I try to drill down to the moments which made that person know who they are. And usually what that does is, if I tell a story that's kind of vulnerable, for example, maybe this will kind of resonate. When I started my agency, before that, I worked for a boss that was kind of a tyrant. He's like my way or the highway type of person. So when I started, I'm like, I'm going to be the cool boss. I want to let people give ideas, you know, be flexible and open-minded, right? But I wasn't. I was in a nice way. I was like, oh, that's a good idea, but I don't think that's going to work. Or it's like, I knew that inside, I was shutting them down, right? And 2 years into it, one of my kind of key employees quit. And we were having a conversation on why. And like about 30 minutes into it, he said, son, I realized you're never going to let me make decisions. And at that moment, I just started bawling out, crying. And then I didn't know why.
Yeah.
But reflecting back, it was because I had built this identity of me, of this cool boss that I'm open-minded and things like that. But deep inside, I wasn't. I knew he was right. So when I tell a story like that, some people might listen to that and go, holy shit, like, that's me. I'm doing that, right? But I've never heard anybody else say it, right? It's vulnerable. At that moment, it's kind of like when you know a secret and I know a secret, and we're the only two people in the world that knows it, it creates an immediate bond, right?
Yeah.
So like another example is with Mel Robbins. She tells the story of how she was bankrupt, but she tells the detail of, I used to stand in the cashier of grocery store trying to come up with excuses that I'm going to give when my credit card declines. Or I would unplug all the phones in my house because every time the bank calls, like I would get anxiety attacks. So when she talks about those moments, people who are listening is like, oh my gosh, I thought I was the only one who did that. So that creates an immediate connection with the audience. So.
I love that. And I will add on to that. Like, you know, I've tried to not be the guy that posts just the positives or all that, but I grew up in the lower. I say, people say, well, you come from old money or new money? And we came from no money. So that's the Ryan Alford story. And, you know, but my best performing piece of content was talking about my first job washing dishes for 8 months at a meat and three restaurant where I would scrub macaroni dishes till my hands would practically bleed for like 8 months. And I did it for 8 months, and it taught me probably more about life and work than anything else. But that's been like my best performing piece of content, because I think, to your point, it's like relatability and, you know, vulnerability of like just telling that story.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when I look at some like superstar or something like that, I'm like, oh yeah, it's easy for you to say it, right? But then as soon as you tell that story, it's like, oh, if you can do it, I can do it too.
Exactly.
That kind of deal.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Like, if I can do it, anybody can do it. But talking with Sun Yi, founder of Night Owl, Night Owl's digital agency and marketing wizard, guru, specialist, everything. Let me tell you, you got to go follow him. We're going to hit his social channels up here shortly. But Sun, I want to transition just a hair. Talk to me about, let's get into some real world stuff. We got AI bubbling off. You're building websites. I mean, let's start maybe down your path of like, what's happening in website development these days? Like with everything else going on, like is it changed that much, or is it still like,
for me,
WordPress and beyond? Like
every time something new comes out, people are like, oh, websites are done. Like that's so 90s or something like that.
Yeah.
But I don't see that because I feel like the market itself is growing. Like every day there's new creators coming out, there's new businesses popping up and things like that. So I don't see that happening. With the AI stuff, I don't know too much about AI, but I know my video editors use AI to do B-rolls and stuff like that. So it definitely helps us in doing what we do.
Yeah.
But one thing I realized is, and I'm sure you noticed this too, when you try to look for talent, whether it's designer, copywriter, or a salesperson or whatever it is, you realize that like 90% of people out there suck. They're like mediocre. So then you go to other people that who knows a good lawyer, good designer or whatever, and you say, can you recommend one? And usually the best ones are booked up. They're busy, right? Yep. They're not necessarily looking for clients. So I bump into that problem all the time. So when I end up hiring usually copywriters or designer or something like that, they're very mediocre. I think those people are in trouble because AI can actually write pretty mediocre copy better than them. And AI can do mediocre design better than them. But what I see is I tried all this prompt on ChatGPT because I teach storytelling in my community.
Yeah.
So I know all the ins and outs of how to make a story better. So I try to teach ChatGPT how to do it. And I kept prompting. But I couldn't get it to tell like an exceptional story. I can tell it to give me a pretty good story, but I couldn't get it like the top 10% of storytellers, right? So I think those people are pretty safe as of now.
Yes. I know. I just said it's good. The cream's just going to rise to the crop even farther.
Exactly.
I might be naive, but I don't feel threatened by it because I've done the same things, and it helps us in our agency shortcut some things that don't need nuance, so it has its helpful things. But the moment, like you said, if I start throwing something at it that would normally take me, an hour of thinking and like distilling and thinking about thinking, which is my favorite thing, it can't get there. It's like, and maybe it's because I'm the judge, jury, and executioner, but it's just not, what can be distilled or brought together either in storytelling or positioning. It's just I'm starting to see through the holes where it all starts to sound a little bit the same. It's like it could be a different client. And I'm like, I feel like I'm eating the same bowl of cereal every day.
But that's kind of how it is, right? Most copy, most stories, they sound similar because of that.
Yeah.
And what I noticed is because, AI cannot have morality, right? So they can't say this is right and this is wrong. They can't do that. But if I look at my best performing posts or other people's best performing content, stuff that people love, it's usually the ones where they have an opinion, where they put their foot down and say, this is good and this is bad.
That's right.
And that's what people love. But what AI is going to do is like, this is good under this kind of context. This is bad under this kind of context. But like, and they're going to give all those nuance.
Yes.
And nobody wants that.
No. That's right. You're so right. Like I've literally noticed that very thing where it's like, it's almost afraid to offend, you know, or whatever, or to contradict, and that's sort of the essence of life is agitation a little bit, right? And it's the least agitational content on the planet.
Yeah, exactly. Like to give you an example, people. Well, I don't know about now, but back in the days, people used to love Apple.
Yeah.
But then there was also a group of people who hate Apple, right? They're strictly like, whether it's Linux or Windows or whatever. And I think you need that, right? People love the Yankees, people who love the Red Sox hate the Yankees. And that's kind of what branding is. Like, it's finding our people, right? And in order to do that, we have to piss off some people who don't agree with that.
Yep.
But if you make it everything mediocre, safe, yeah, people might not get offended, but nobody's going to love you either.
Yep. Yeah. And I'm going to thank you for teeing up a campaign that made me a lot of money called Droid. It was the anti-iPhone. Like literally, I worked on that campaign in 2008. We sold more smartphones than Apple for 2 weeks, and Motorola, like bailed on it because it was a little polarizing. But we sold, we're the only smartphone maker to outsell Apple in pretty much its entire history with the Motorola Droid campaign. Droid does, iPhone doesn't. And it was the exact of what you're saying. And people loved it because, the iPhone came out and it was great because it was stupid simple. You could do everything you wanted, but it didn't have you couldn't change out the memory. You couldn't change the resolution of the camera. You can now, but you couldn't do all these things. And the whole campaign was around, I can't, but Droid does. I
love it.
Yeah.
Because those geeks that want to control everything, right? They want to customize everything. They hate Apple because
they
you can't
hate
do
it.
that.
You can't. And in 2008 especially, it's gotten a little better, but that was a fun campaign. And the exact example of how you break through by playing the other side of the fence.
Exactly.
So son, talk to me, let's give everybody some value here on your storytelling. So what your art of storytelling, what are some of the key tenets that you counsel clients on, or in your coaching or things like that? Are there any nuggets you could give away for people that trying to do better storytelling?
So a lot of times the first thing is what I said. If I say, hey, tell me a story, they tell me their life story, right? Their biography. And I say, that's not a story. Let's hone in on a specific moment, some life-changing event. So, and then when they tell me that, they usually summarize it. They'll like, I was stuck in this 9-to-5 job and I wasn't fulfilled. I was making money, but I wasn't fulfilled. So eventually I had to do something about it. So one day I just walked into my boss's office, quit, and then I started, this business. And then now I'm going to show you how to do it or something like that, right?
Yep.
And that's pretty much like every story. Like, somewhere in between, that's when I hit rock bottom, something like that.
Yeah.
So what I do is I say, don't use thought verbs. Thought verbs are like, I thought, I felt, or, I understood. You're trying to describe the story rather than actually showing me what happened, right? So one of the things I say is, try to draw a picture for me so I can actually picture myself being there. So when you said, when you're at that restaurant, scrubbing for 8 months, like until your hands are bleeding.
Yeah.
That's the kind of story I want. Because once you draw a picture for me, here's a good example I use. So I can either say, I was so broke, but I felt like a fraud. because everybody thought I was successful. That's one thing. But if I draw a picture, it's like on payday, I would take all my friends out to dinner, buy drinks. And then for the next 2 weeks, I'll sit at home eating ramen noodles, waiting for my next paycheck.
Yeah.
So that draws a picture of what being broke looks like, right? So that's one quick theme. Another thing is, people try to tell this hero's journey story, but it's a lot of times it sounds like a sob story, like they're playing the victim. So for example, they might say something like, when I was young, I was weird. I was different than anyone else. So nobody wanted to play with me, but I didn't care. So I just, hung out by myself. And then eventually I found other weird kids and we formed our own tribe. So the lesson is find your own tribe, right? Now that sounds like a hero's journey story, but it's not. It's actually, they're saying that, I didn't care. I was always cool. Not cool, but I always, was authentic and I'm still authentic now, right? The better way to tell that story is I was weird. Nobody wanted to play with me, but I wanted to fit in. I wanted to be part of the popular crowd. So I dressed differently. I talked differently and I became somebody else, but it became exhausting. So one day I decided to just be myself and lose these friends. But then I ended up finding my own tribe. There's an internal transformation there where there's an old me and the new me. And one of the ways I tell them to find that is don't focus on the event, the tragedy, right? Okay, my father died, or I got into an accident, or this person fired me. Because when you dwell on that, that sounds like a sob story. That sounds like you're just blaming everybody else, right?
Yeah.
But when you quickly get over that and then go straight to what did I do wrong as a result of that? Like, what was my fault? That's when it becomes a transformation story.
I love that. You taking the own blame for your, like what happened and kind of owning it. And then how you pivoted from it. So nobody wants to give you cheese with your wine.
Exactly.
Is what I
and
call
it
that.
sounds like when you hear a story like that, like you might not realize it, but you can tell it's like that sounds like a sob story, or that sounds like that person's like stolen trauma, or like it sounds like they're playing the victim.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, no one likes that. I love both of those. I can see how that uncovers, deeper stories that people relate to, which then translates to better content for how they might bring those stories to life, or, getting and building the natural tribe around whoever story that might be, which is
exactly
ultimately what you're coaching them to do, right?
Mm-hmm. I always say selling is teaching. Because to give you an example, I have a friend who's a yoga teacher, but let's say you don't do yoga. That person is thinking like, yoga is like some spiritual people that wear Lululemon that go on like on the mat and they're stretching or something like that. But the story that she tells is she says she went to a yoga boot camp because she worked at Lululemon and they made her go there. But she fell in love with it. She practiced it for 11 years. But a few years ago, her aunt passed away from cancer. But she spent the last few last few months of her aunt's life sitting there in the hospital, sitting in that hard chair, holding her hand, crying together, laughing together, talking about life together, all the ups and downs. And she said that was a familiar feeling. Like her family stopped coming. They couldn't handle the mental toughness. So they stopped coming. And so she was there by herself all the way till her aunt's last dying breath. And the reason why she was able to do that and that feeling, that familiar feeling, was when she's on the yoga mat in the 90-degree room, holding that pose for another extra minute, that she was practicing that uncomfortableness. And that's what yoga does for you. it helps you get through those tough times in life. And that's the gift that yoga gave to me. And now I want to give that gift to you. That's why I teach yoga. And that usually will people are like, oh man, I kind of want to try yoga now.
Yeah.
Something like that.
I tell that story with getting tattoos. Like I say, I like it because it teaches me, it's painful, right? But I like it. But number one, I like the art of it. That's number one. But number two, now that I've done it, it teaches me control. And I actually think it's therapeutic, and I'm not going to have tattoos all over my whole body like some people, but it does. It's similar to what you just described in that, because I feel like it makes me not tougher. I'm tough because I get tattoos, but like holding back, like, and taking the pain and kind of, I don't know. I feel like it's unlocked something mentally for me.
I got addicted to a tattoo for a little bit because every time I get one, I'm in this euphoria state where I feel a sense of accomplishment.
Yeah.
I'm looking at it like, wow. And then because I was in pain for like 3 hours, like now, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there's something.
Any tattoo artists listening right now?
Yeah,
that's a great brand story.
Yeah, we're selling for you. Yeah, I hope you take this clip and put it on your social media. Just tag Son and I for proper credit. We'll take 10% commission on that as well. All jokes aside, Son, this has been great, man. I'd love to do this regularly with you. Just picking your brain, and maybe a couple times a year. You're a really bright, intelligent person, and I'm fascinated by your content and your approach. It's very different, but really well received. I think our audience is going to love this.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me on.
Son, tell everyone where they can keep up with you, your content, get involved with your coaching, night owls, all the stuff we've been talking about.
Yeah, so everything I post on my Instagram, which is sun, S-U-N, .Y-I. And all the links are in my bio, everything you can find in there.
Keeping it easy. Do yourself a favor. Go follow him like I do. You'll get addicted. The carousel craziness, but it's all unpacked. I'm swiping. My time on page with you is increasing your algorithm a lot, buddy. I guarantee you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hey guys, go follow Sun Yi. And of course, you know where I'm at Ryan Alford on all the platforms. Verified before you could buy it. You know it. We're at theradcast.com. Search for Sun Yi. You'll find all the highlight clips from today. And there's going to be some good ones, let me tell you. We'll see you next time on the Radcast.
To listen or watch full episodes, visit us on the web at theradcast.com or follow us on social media at our Instagram account, the.rad.cast, or at Ryan Alford. Stay radical.